terms of what was it like to be in a firefight, this is going to sound very weird. To me, it's kind of relaxing, and this is why. I really believe your prior training is paying off. You train for all these adverse situations of what about this scenario and that scenario. You understand that the people you're rolling with are some of the toughest people in all of the world, so you feel very confident about the guy on your left and right. When I was shot by this grenade launcher, basically when this thing explodes, just imagine like 1,000 razors flying out. It was kind of very small. There were some chunks. I got some chunks in my back and stuff like that, but what happened to my leg, this thing looked horrendous, and the surgeon's like, it literally was like a razor blade just flew into your calf and just kind of wreaked havoc. It wasn't like a big chunk of your calf came off. It just kind of hit the right spot. Over 30,000 veterans have committed suicide since this war started, and we've lost about 7,500 on the battlefield. So in theory, it's more dangerous us being back home than it was for us being in combat. For me to deal with like physical pain, that's not, I don't want to make light of it. It's never been a big thing for me. I've just played sports all my life, and it's something you endure. And I had to deal with my own battles on the emotional side of when there was no more war and you're just kind of alone with your thoughts. And some of the emotional pain that I just couldn't stand was watching these great men and women who raise their right hand, sign a blank check payable with their lives, and when they come home, they're kind of forgotten, and they're not given the care that they deserve. And, you can even hear people on the political side, they talk about everyone else except for veterans. And it just felt like we were just kind of left behind, or we were just kind of a pain in someone's backside. And that's one thing I love about living in this country is if you identify a problem, you can go and take care of it yourself. And just thought to myself, who better to take care of veterans than ourselves? And let's just go for it. And that's been what our motivation has been. And literally every night before I go to bed, I think to myself, what have I done for a veteran today? And that just gives me more inspiration to wake up the next morning and go after and accomplish a mission. So we were flying into, we were in the Helmand province, and my unit, we were running with the 7th Afghan National Special Operations Regiment. So I had Afghan commandos and Afghan special forces. And so the Afghan special forces, we would put them out on things called village stability platforms with other Marine Raider teams, other Army special forces, or other SEAL teams, where these guys would get garbed up, full beard, doing everything from building a well to standing up a local police force. My ultimate job was to take out the commandos, who were much like an Army Ranger, if you want to kind of paint them into a picture. And we would do raids on high-value individual Taliban commanders. So we were flying into the spot that we thought was called Northern Shirake in the Helmand province. And when we started going in there, we would fly with the 160th Special Operation Aviation Regiment, or if you guys saw Black Hawk Down, those pilots, they were our insert platform. We would do a thing called Map of the Earth, and we'd get about 300 feet off the ground, and we're kind of whizzing in between the canyons. And we have all this helicopters and aircraft and jets, everything around us. And we started picking up word that the Taliban knew we were coming. And we heard the Taliban literally say, why are they coming here? Don't they understand this is like, basically our capital? And what we quickly learned, and we came in under fire, was that we were in a spot called Kaligas, which was literally the Taliban's capital in the Helmand province. So there was a lot of firefights the first night when we got down there. The conduct our raid, and I just remember thinking to myself, we're earning our stories on this one. This is going to be a hell of a fight. And we were trading casualties back and forth for a couple days. Typically, how things would go is we would do our raid at nighttime. We would do what we had to do. In the morning time, you'd hear them go to morning prayer. Women and children were leaving the village. More Taliban was coming in. They were trying to figure out where we were. And then we usually get into a morning fight. It would break off around mid-afternoon. You hear their afternoon prayer. Then around some time after that, we were going to fight again and up to the evening. So, we were taking out some of their guys. They were taking out some of our commandos. And I just remember it was a really hot day. It was actually about 2 days ago, 9 years. It was July 12th, 2012, I was shot. It was just a really, really hot day in Helmand province. And I'm next to my corpsman, and I'm next to one of my dog handlers. And we're talking, I look at my corpsman, I'm like, man, I could just go for an ice-cold Coca-Cola right now. And as soon as I said that, a grenade went flying by my head, sounded a lot like a fly ball. And I either said the word fuck, or I definitely knew, I thought the word, because you knew they had us. And that thing cranked off, and I took shrapnel all throughout my body, both legs, up through my back, into the left side of my face. The corpsman lost part of his tricep, and our dog handler had actually exploded and went underneath his body armor into his stomach, so he went right down. So at that point, it literally looked like, where we were in the Helmand province, it's called the Green Zone, so it's like a triple canopy jungle, because you got the Helmand River Valley, but it looked like giants had their hands on the trees and were shaking it. The amount of ammo that was flying at us, of small arm rounds, rocket-propelled grenades, mortars, you felt like you were in a popcorn machine. Everything underneath you was just exploding. So we got the guys in cover. I called my higher command and gave a brevity code to let them know that my position was about to be overran, because we had Taliban maneuvering all over us. It was amazing how cool and calm the team was during this, and I always say our prior training was paying off. I got on the radio, I talked to my guy who was going to be second in command. I'm like, listen, I'm shot. I'm going to hang out as long as I can, but once I say you got command, you're taking it over, so just listen to what I got going on right now. And he's like, yep, we got it. And we're passing the information back and forth. We had aircraft come in, and we just started eliminating all the enemy threat. And then it was time that I could start getting my casualties out of there. My dog handler was, he was turning green at this point. And you kind of knew, we were on the clock on that point. So we brought in the Air Force PJs, came in to come medevac us out. And I remember I'm like kind of limping out. They had to put a tourniquet on my left leg because there's just blood everywhere. I do remember calling in my own CASEVAC, which is a pretty interesting time. We had to give a thing called a MIST report, so it was mechanism, injury, signs, symptoms, and treatment, and then you give a battle roster number. So I did the first two guys, and then I'm doing myself, which was comical because I'm kind of like looking at my body like, well, I got that going on, I got this, there's a piece of metal in my head, like I got a tourniquet on me, and I gave my battle roster number. So I go Bravo Uniform 0429, you hear everything get quiet. And they're like, say again. And I'm like, Bravo Uniform 0429. And they're like, say that one again. I'm like, hey guys, it's me. I gave my call sign. I'm like, I am shot, but I'm in the fight and I need your guys' help. And they all kind of snapped in at the higher command at our Special Operations Task Force and got me everything I needed. So now that when I'm getting ready to leave, we're hobbling out to the helicopter. I put my hand on a wall. The wall collapsed, and a bunch of Afghan hornets come out and start stinging me. So been shot, now I'm stung by hornets. So I get onto the helicopter, and I'm sitting there, and we're all kind of sitting there. We had to bring our dog with us since the handler was wounded, and kind of just like in a kind of crunched position in the corner. Look at my one leg, you see my calf muscles behind my knee, and I point at my other leg where the tourniquet is, and I'm like, pointing at it, and the PJ goes, oh, that looks like it hurts. I'm like, no, it's a tourniquet. Get that thing off me. And he's like, you got it, and they cut it off. And then they gave me some ketamine. And so now I'm just kind of sitting there a little bit blacked out, kind of flying into the to the hospital. And as they're pulling me out, like some of the nurses are grabbing my head. They took me right in to get a CAT scan. And a British nurse comes in. She goes, I need to talk to Captain Buckley. Everyone else get out. So the British nurse goes, do you have HIV or AIDS? And I'm like, no. I'm like, I literally just got tested before I came here. She goes, well, we got to test you because one of the nurses sliced his hand on the shrapnel in your head and bled into you, and you bled into him, so we got to make sure. So I'm like, okay. And so they take the CAT scan. Now I'm really loopy. I remember they took off my entire uniform, and some of the nurses I'm still friends with were standing there, and I looked at them and said, take it in, ladies. This is 32 years of excellence. Sorry. So some good drugs at that point, right? And then they reeled me in to go get my operation. And the doctor looked at my left leg. He goes, that leg isn't looking good. I might have to take it. So now I'm thinking I've been shot, stung by bees. I'm getting tested for HIV. Now you might take my left leg. And I said to the doctor, I'm like, listen, if you take my left leg, when I wake up, I'm going to beat you with it. And he's like, I got you. Happy thoughts. And he just kind of put the mask on me, and away I went. And when I woke up, everything was still working. It was all good. I was in the recovery room. There were a bunch of Americans, like Raiders on my team, and a bunch of our Afghan commandos were in recovery. And one of our element leaders on my team came in, and he just looks around and he smiled. He goes, well, I think we lost that one. And everyone just kind of starts laughing. And they were getting ready to pack up my corpsman and our dog handler, send them back to America. My surgeon happened to be an Army Ranger who went medical side, and he looked at me. He goes, what do you want to do? And I said, what are my options? And he's like, they want to send you home, but if you tell me you want to stay, I'm going to keep you here. And I'm like, I'm staying. And he goes, I thought you were going to say that. And nurse is like, no, he needs to go home. He goes, my patient, my call, he's staying. So they did another surgery 24 hours later, and then another surgery 48 hours later. And I didn't miss a single raid. I was able to get back up and operate the following week. I just remember that night, what we were told is if you are a casualty when you wake up from surgery, you can call your family if you want to. Obviously, if you're killed in action, things have to happen. So they're like, hey, call your family. I'm like, no, they don't need to hear about this. And they're like, no, just call. So I call my mom, and she is in tears. And I'm like, hey, and she goes, are you all right? I'm like, well, are you all right? And she's like, well, I wasn't the one shot, so you answer first. And I'm like, everything's good. And I'm like, what happened? And she goes, well, I get a call, and they said you've been in a firefight, and they hung up on, they said they'll get in touch with me. I almost collapsed. I'm trying to figure out why you're in a firefight. Like, she thought we were shooting fireballs at each other. And my parent command here in California was a good job keeping everyone up to date what was happening, but from what I was told, the entire town converged on my house. So my mom's like, when are you going to come home? I'm like, I'm not. And she got really upset about that, but I just told her, I'm like, that's not the son you raised, and if I have the ability to keep fighting and lead my team, I'm going to do it. And that was that. So like I said, a lot of great doctors and nurses there that put me back together. A couple of days after my final surgery, I did my 20 pull-ups and ran 3 miles, and we were good to go and get back out into the fight. I really think that training just keeps you extremely focused. There's a lot on the line. There's human lives on the line. So all your attention, everything you got going on is focused on that simple problem set. Everything moves at the speed of trust, and I had nothing but trust for all my guys. Believe in your guys. Believe in the mission. It's a 70% solution. You're never going to have the perfect answer. Just get enough to go out the door, because you're working with an active, fluid enemy that things will not go as planned. And it's just how quick can you adjust, adapt, and overcome. I think about 10 of us got Purple Hearts out of that one. So it was obviously heavily kinetic, and I don't know how many commandos. I mean, we lost a lot. I mean, my overall numbers that I was in charge of 777 people and 4 dogs. Was kind of my camp that I ran. I think what was the most difficult point when you're actually wounded wasn't so much the pain, it's the amount of adrenaline that hits your body and calming yourself. And that's why I always tell people, take 3 deep breaths. Regardless of how bad or dire the situation might seem, if you just take 3 deep breaths and slow it down, everything's going to get a lot more simple. And to me, a firefight was just a problem set of, okay, we're getting shot from here, we got this, let's kind of move our pieces around to counter their pieces and go after it. But it's a really focused moment. I mean, I always tell people sometimes civilian life's a lot more difficult because you're getting emails from this direction, you're getting phone calls from that direction, and bills from this direction. In a firefight, it's just you and your opponent, and that's all you're focused on, and that's all you want to eliminate at that moment. So in terms of the 100% disability, that didn't come for a little while, and actually when I went back into Afghanistan, I got injured again in a helicopter incident where we just landed in the wrong spot. It was nighttime, it was browned out conditions, so all you have is your night vision on, you're kind of looking, and I had to be the first one on the ground since I'm the ground force commander. And I remember I took a step out and I just dropped about 15 feet. So I always joked it's kind of like rolling down the windows type things. And I have all my battle rattle on and probably about another 100 pounds on my back. So I stuck the landing, I twisted, and I just felt the crunch, and I just went right down. So I remember I spit up some dirt, and I realized I'm right on the middle of a street, which is not where you want to be in Helmand province because there's probably IEDs on the roads. So all the guys started coming off and jumping out, and I had to hand my weapon to one guy, and I took my rucksack off, and they stood me up, and when I put pressure on my left ankle, it felt like there was just broken glass in my ankle. All you heard was crunching. So I went, man, and then they're coming out with RPGs. I had this big black helicopter just hanging out. I'm like, get that thing out of here, and we're going to start going. So I start crawling with my guys. We get up to the raid site. I'm in this little wadi, pretty much a little hole, just kind of hanging out, talking to the aircraft. The guys are putting the explosives to go into the building. All of our explosives are failing. So I'm like, when it rains, it pours one of these days. Finally get in there. We do our thing. I crawl in there, and I tell my guys, I'm like, find another landing zone because I will leave tomorrow night. I'm like, this thing's kind of jacked up. They couldn't find another landing zone, and we only had one in that area, and we were only going to be there for 48 hours. So I couldn't have each night a helicopter landing in the same spot where it's asking for problems. So we took my boot off. My ankle was like the size of my head. I always carried a pair of Chuck Taylors with me, so we put a pair of Chuck Taylors on. We took duct tape, and we did some spats where we just kind of rigged it up like a little makeshift cast, and stayed on that for 2 days to fight the Taliban. We were very busy, so I was doing everything I could, kind of controlling the fight. I couldn't take any narcotics. If I did, I'd have to give up command. So it was a lot of Advil. I remember my corpsman was like, I told you only take 4 Advil and you're taking 8 Advil. He's like, I'm like, listen, I get it. I'm living in the now. I'll deal with liver problems in my 80s later, but let me just kind of numb this out. You just kind of stay focused, and again, you're operating in an alpha world, so we're all just kind of making fun of me for having a broken ankle, so there's a lot of laughter with it too. So, and then when we were leaving, basically had to crawl out of there, got back on the helicopter. When we landed at LZ Tombstone back at our base, one of the guys came walking on with crutches, went back to my camp, had a couple of slices of pizza, and then went back over to the hospital. And it was middle of the night, so the nurses were like, what do you think you have? I'm like, oh, it's a high ankle sprain. I'm fine. And they're like, well, we can't make the call, but that x-ray does not look like a high ankle sprain. And they're like, you probably have to start thinking about going home. And sure enough, the doctors come in. They're like, hey, you have a dislocated ankle and it's a spinal fracture. So they're like, we can put the ankle back in place here, but we got to get you up to Germany for your surgery. So by the time we got to Germany, they're like, hey, it's great. We're going to fly in your family. We're going to do surgery here. You'll recover for a couple weeks and then go back. But my ankle was so big, they're like, we could do the surgery. We just couldn't put you back together again. So they flew me all the way back here to California. And basically I had to hang out on my girlfriend's couch for a couple weeks with my leg in the air, just waiting for the swelling to go down. And then from there they did the surgery. And again, that was a long rehab. That was about 4 months. But then got myself back up to full duty again and went back out on more missions. And then from there, when I retired out, they literally had me listed at 80% disabled. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Didn't think anything about it. But then when I started talking to more people who were 100% disabled, but probably didn't see some of the things I did or my other teammates, I actually knew a guy at the VA, and they're like, let us fly you out to Boston and redo your VA disability. And if you added up all my points, I was about 360% disabled. And that's when I got my 100% disabled rating. But that kind of led into me saying, hey, I need to help out veterans who are getting kind of screwed on their VA disability rating. And we added that into Battle Brothers. with the pain aspect during a mission, for us, mission has priority. For me, it was always the mission, the men, then myself. I was the third priority. I wanted to make sure whatever my mission was, we accomplished it. Then I wanted to take care of my men, and then whatever leftover time we had, I worried about myself. So that's where kind of mentally I was able to take myself into kind of a happy place, if you will, where I kind of was blocking out the pain. I was just focused on the mission and my men. When you get back and the bullets aren't all around you and it's a lot of quiet times and all that stuff, that's when you start kind of feeling some of the residual pain from your body, and then also I think some of the emotional pain that you go through. That's when I think some of the emotional anguish started coming out, because you're so focused on the mission. Or there we all are at the bar having beers, and you're just kind of looking at some empty seats that'll never be filled again. And those are your buddies that aren't coming back home. And that was kind of some of the tough parts, I think, for us for that transition. Especially when, we all got back home. I can remember guys would come to my house in Pacific Beach, and maybe they'd come over with like 2 6-packs, and we might just sit on the porch looking at it, nothing, just drinking beer, and we're not even talking. We're just kind of trying to process what happened. And that's where I think some of the emotional side and the post-traumatic stress and things like that really start kind of coming to light, is when, like, the quiet times. And that's when I started really noticing, hey, there's some issues here. And just not within my own unit, but with all these men and women coming back. And that was kind of validated the other week, where you saw that one stat come out where there was over 30,000 veterans have committed suicide since this war started. And we've lost about 7,500 on the battlefield. I mean, so in theory, it's more dangerous us being back home than it was for us being in combat. A lot of us were athletes and all that stuff, and you just, you just suck it up, right? Like you're never going to be 100%. And you just deal with it, and you're fighting with the guys on the left and the right, and that's all that matters. But when you come home and you're not in that team room anymore, and there is no more wars, there's no more battles to be fought. Now you start having your own personal battles and your own demons you're starting to learn about, and you got to learn how to live above them. You never get rid of them. You just got to learn how to live above them. When I finally got classified 100% disabled, as weird as this may sound, there was a little bit of relief, because I knew my family was going to was taken care of. My family gets full insurance. My kids, they're going to get scholarships to college, like all these things. And, all of us who serve, I believe we're all sheepdogs. We all have that sheepdog DNA where we just want to serve. And we don't really care about ourselves. We care about our flock. And to see that they were going to be taken care of, that was probably an emotional win for me. But again, I know I still had some battles I have to fight, and I fight them every morning. To us, like, physical pain was just like a rite of passage. Like, you get a scar, oh, hey, cool, whatever. I banged up my shoulder. I mean, that's just life, and it's not a big deal. And everyone's fine talking about that. I think being, again, in like the alpha world of the military, no one wants to talk about their feelings or hurt. It's just like something you feel weird saying out loud. And that's where we really had to kind of crack that nut, is to get people to say, you know what, there's a problem here and I need some help. I'm turning to alcohol and I'm drinking my emotional pains away, and I'm trying to find the answer at the bottom of the bottle, which never works out. Or I'm taking these opiates just to kind of numb me out and just get through the day. And you just start seeing some really bad things where you start losing that sense of purpose. And especially when veterans are isolated, that scares me the most, when I hear there's veterans struggling, and I'm like, well, who are they with? Who are they talking to? They're like, they're by themselves, they're in the hotel room at this place. That's never a good sign. And that's why now we're trying to almost kind of normalize it, saying it's okay to have post-traumatic stress. It's not a military issue, it's a human condition, and you went through a lot. And it's good to be around people and talk about it. One of the things that we tried to do in our third level decompression was, you almost kind of want to replicate how men and women deployed during World War I and World War II. They were on ships, and it took about 2 weeks to get across the Atlantic, or 2 weeks to get across the Pacific. And so say, for example, I saw some hellacious firefight, and I'm feeling kind of weird about it. And I go to the chow hall, and I'm sitting there with some food, and I start talking to you, and you might be sensing the same thing. And then I say something to you, like, well, no, I went through something like that too. Well, now you don't feel isolated and weird. You're like, oh, wait, we both kind of have a shared experience, and we can kind of get that off our chest. And then what we started seeing in Vietnam was these guys might be in some insane firefight, and then 48 hours later, they're in a bed with a screaming baby they just met and their wife, and they're still trying to comprehend what they just went through. And you really start seeing some of the issues there. And that's why now we're trying to maybe like slow things down, give these men and women an opportunity to kind of talk about what happened, process what happened. That way, these are some of the greatest people that we have in our country as serve in our military. We want them to continue to be great while they're out in the private sector and doing great things for our country. And I think we're slowly starting to get there as people are starting to kind of normalize post-traumatic stress and some alternative medicine and other options out there. You're really seeing some veterans turn their lives around for the better. It's not a disorder. It's just something that we have. I mean, like you kind of look at the word disorder, and it has a nasty kind of ugly term to it, where I think people are getting turned off by saying I don't have a disorder. I'm fine. I think medically they still want to call it PTSD, and that's fine from the medical side. That's what they have to put in a book. But for all of us, it's just post-traumatic stress. It's just you went through something, you experienced something, and you're having issues dealing with it, and that's okay. We can get over it. It's just you're never going to fully forget about it, subdue it, or say I'm PTS free. But you got to accept you have something going on that maybe some other people don't, but you can still live with it and get better. For me, when I came back, I think my hardest transition from a deployment probably was my first one I did in Fallujah, Iraq with 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. I just didn't want to be around crowded people. If I saw things on the road like a bag, to me, I looked at it as an indicator there might be an IED right there, and I might swerve the car out of that lane and just do things I was kind of doing in combat or looking up all around and just kind of had hypervigilance. I learned, and I think people got a little nervous, didn't really know what to do with me. But then I kind of learned how to deal with my transition coming back home. But what I found best was to talk to people like, hey, I might need an hour or two by myself. I might just want to take a nap, or I just might want to sit in a dark room and think about some things. And it's not like I'm trying to get away from you. I just need this for myself to kind of slow some things down. And then I think, too, for them to be able to speak about what they experienced and what they were going through, it kind of makes you a better team so you can kind of help support them, while you're downrange with some things of how can I best talk to them when I'm downrange to make them feel better and get some sleep that night. And how do they deal with things knowing I'm about to go forward again, knowing what has happened with me in the past. And it really just comes down to communication and talking and just seeing what works best for each other. And that's where I found probably the most success with dealing with post-traumatic stress between spouses. Yeah, she really came in at a very interesting time. Wasn't looking for her. She wasn't looking for me. How the story goes, and it was just kind of the right thing. But when, it's like when you have your perfect match, you have it. And we are meant for each other. Even when it was, I had a nice high paying job, making 6 figures with an ed tech firm, number 1 kid on the way. And I walked downstairs and saying, hey, I think I can help out veterans with cannabis and I want to kind of go after it. And she said, go. That was probably one of the dumbest things I could ever have done at that point from a financial standpoint. But she believed in me and believed in the mission and believes in our American heroes. And she's been backing me up ever since. And, here we are today. Her family, she had Marines in her family. And some of them struggled with post-traumatic stress. And she never wanted anything to do with anyone in the military until she met me. And she just went this deployment's really interesting, or it's eye-opening for me. Because we lost some friends during that deployment. And she's like, I knew we were at war, but it wasn't anything I really thought about. But now it's like we're losing people I know and you're shot. And she goes, it's a whole different perspective. And I never realized what you guys were going through. And, I just think it was a big kind of growing up thing for her, because we lost, one of my dear friends who introduced my wife and I to each other. He was killed and I flew him back to do his eulogy and then flew right back to Afghanistan. And I think that was kind of just a crazy moment for her to kind of just take all that in. Was there a moment or a trigger that kind of wanted me to get out there and help out the veterans? I can't really recall a pinpoint moment. I think it was a culmination of a lot of things I was just witnessing, where I saw myself when I'd go into the VA and hear them saying, well, let's try this on you, or let's try that on you. And you kind of feel like a guinea pig, like, and you're giving me stuff that's not working, and I'm taking 15 pills, and I just feel numb the entire time. And when I'm seeing the way I think we all were going out, and I'll be honest myself, we were just drinking way too much. I mean, it was just kind of at the bar, we were just drinking, and that's how we kind of dealt with the pain. And then we lost some friends to suicide. And then I think the national media started taking notice of veterans killing themselves in the parking lot at the VA. And that's why I'm like, this has to end. And there's a lot of great nonprofits that were helping out active duty military and their families. But for me, it was kind of like when I left the military, like I walked out the door and like a tumbleweed went by me and I turned on my car and drove off the base, and that was it. That was the end of it. And you kind of feel alone and afraid. So we just thought perhaps there's something here we can do to kind of help guide our active duty members into their veteran and civilian life and give them the best chance to go do some great things and offer this 3-tier approach of a personal, medical, and economic, with the ultimate goal of them having that sense of purpose like they did in the military and hopefully avoiding a situation that they cannot come back from. The first steps I started taking in order to establish Battle Brothers was to get our 501c3 status. I kind of more or less had it like, okay, here it is. I got a shell. I want to protect it. And then let's kind of start putting things together. And I really wanted to make sure that people understood we were doing the right thing for the right reason. There's a lot of military nonprofits that unfortunately just kind of take advantage of the nonprofit status and do very little for veterans. So the first thing we started doing was identifying veterans who did not receive the VA disability rating they felt they deserved. And we went forward and helped them out on there. And we worked with a third party. We paid, it was about $2,000 per vet. And we would pay it out Battle Brothers. And we started getting some quick wins where we started showing these veterans and sharing their stories that they went from this percent up to 100%. And people were like, oh, wait a minute, you're actually doing the real thing. You're actually here working for veterans. And we started kind of building it off of there. And it's been a long process, but now we're getting all like kind of the right people in the right spots, where we just brought on a chief financial officer. We brought on an executive director. We've always had a really, really great CPA because we make sure everything's very clean, very tight with Battle Brothers, just because it is a nonprofit. And we're really kind of building up a good founding here in San Diego, and we're going to keep branching out throughout the country, where we've been able to have impact with veterans in Texas and veterans out in North Carolina on the East Coast. But we want to kind of keep expanding that and keep building our ambassador network and kind of cover the entire country. One of the things we ask out of Battle Brothers Foundation is, if we help you out, you come back as an ambassador. And there's nothing more powerful than that ambassador talking to a new person going through the program and saying, I was in your shoes 8 months ago. I know what you're going through. Just stick with the program. We're going to make it out together. It's just a little bit more powerful and a little more impactful. Battle Brothers serves all veterans. As long as you were honorably discharged, we're going to be there, right there with you. Man, woman, we don't care what branch you came from. The reason why we came up with that 3-tier approach was really those are some of the gaps we were seeing that veterans were not getting from their transition into the civilian world. So nothing better than just having another active, like a veteran who has successfully transitioned out of the military, to kind of be there 24/7 to talk to on the phone as you are transitioning. It's a very scary time. People don't realize it until they're in there. On the medical side, that's where we started seeing the gaps with the VA disability ratings. Getting the veterans the appropriate treatment if they are suffering with alcoholism, post-traumatic stress, opiate abuse, or all of the above. Obviously, medical cannabis research, because we do believe that is a great alternative to help reduce the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And then the last part is job placements, the economic side. Like I said, giving that veteran a job, having a sense of purpose every morning they wake up in order to avoid a mistake they can't come back from. And we always stress to the veterans that it doesn't mean you got to start at point A and go through, letter Z. it could just be like, hey, listen, I'm struggling and I'm drinking too much. Can you help me out? Find a treatment center. Absolutely. Then when they get out, they need help with a job. We'll help you find a job. If it's someone like, hey, I just need to find a job, what you guys got? We'll work with them. Or maybe it's just help someone with their VA disability rating, or just someone wants to come through and do our medical cannabis research. Whatever it is, we like to customize each program to the individual veteran that best serves their needs. Some of the challenges that we face as we transition out of active duty life. I'll say for me personally, I felt like, I lost my identity. At one point I'm a team commander in a military special operations team, and I'm doing all this stuff that, I would never believe I'd ever have the opportunity to. And then you're back out into private life, and I'm working at an ed tech firm, and I got a bookstore manager yelling at me because they ordered late. And I'm just thinking, how the heck did we get here? And it was tough. And I just really felt like a Marine without a mission. And that's what kind of gave me my sense of purpose, is what we're doing here with Battle Brothers and with Helmand Valley Growers Company. And I've noticed a lot with all the other veterans, what they would say is like, I was in charge of X and I was doing Y, and now I got this, and I'm dealing with someone who has the sniffles and they can't come to work. Like, it's just really hard for them. So it's almost like, hey, we can all kind of get together. We all can kind of talk, vet out these issues, understand the battlefield that we're now in, and how to make the best decisions, and how to maybe impart some of the things you learned in the military onto these people and teach them some of that leadership. And it's going to make you feel better for it. And just kind of looking at things from a different angle. And we just really see that that's really taken off for our veterans. And I think what's been really big too is like kind of this spiritual journey of that people actually care about them. Like I said, sometimes they just get dumped out in the streets. They're going to the VA. They're getting hit with all these opiates, and they're in a hotel room drinking alcohol with their opiates, not really knowing what to do. And should I even be on this place anymore? And why am I even here? And that's where, we're kind of bringing back into a tribe and let them know they still got a second act, that they can go off and do some great things for this country. Yeah, so some of the big things that we work here on how we help out the veterans and some of our solutions is there are a lot of great nonprofits out there that do a lot for, our wounded veterans, veterans who are missing limbs, or other kind of type of programs helping them out on the educational side. We will try to work as a conduit at that point. I mean, we literally like to sit down a veteran and say, okay, it's like, I'm the high school guidance counselor. You got $1 million. What do you want to do with your life? And then we'll try to gear it on there that maybe they're like, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. Okay, let's find a veteran entrepreneur course we can get you into, and you can kind of start that journey. Or, hey, I want to work on this thing, or I want to be a mechanic. Okay, well, Mercedes-Benz, they actually have a great intern program, and they pay their mechanics a lot. So let's work with them to see if we can get you in an intern program and get forward. But before we get to that point, like I said, maybe it's just a vet looking for a job. We can help out there. But if they are suffering and they have some issues going on, we kind of want them to take that knee for a little bit and get help and take care of themselves first. And then we'll be there to back them and go for any interview or whatever they want to do and back them up and get them in there. So those have been some of the kind of big things for us. And like I said, usually when we help out the VA disability and we get a veteran up to 100%, at that point, they know their lives have changed, and they're going to pretty much listen to anything we have to say. But there are sometimes sad stories with this, and we've had some veterans who just couldn't make it all the way through. We would get them into an in-treatment center, and they didn't want to be there anymore. And it's like, hey, if you walk out, and they're like, what if I walk out? You're quitting on me? It's no, you're quitting on yourself. And you kind of have to draw that hard line where you guys take self responsibility for your actions. And that's something our director of treatment and recovery, who's a great friend of mine, we went to college together, and he battled with some demons, non-veteran, mind you. And he just said it hurts, but you kind of, the 12 steps are a real thing. And if people aren't willing to raise their hand and say, every decision I've made in my life has got me to this point, I need help. He's like, there's no way you can help them out. The first time I really looked at medical cannabis in a hard light was with one of our other co-founders, Andy Myers, who served with me as a Marine Raider. And he was just looking really good. And I asked him, like, what's going on? And he goes, well, you get ready for this one. He's like, I gave up a fifth of Jack for a joint. And you're kind of like, well, what's that all about? And he goes, listen, I'm not drinking and driving. I'm not getting in bar fights. I'm not blacking out. He's like, and I'm waking up in the morning, I'm feeling good. And he's like, in particular, he's like, I've really got into cultivation, and this has helped me transition from a warrior to a gardener. And I thought that was an extremely powerful statement. So I'm like, well, let me try this out. And next thing you know, it's the first night in I don't know how many years I got a full night of sleep. And it just felt like my soul was returning to my body. I felt like myself again. And I went, man, this is incredible. How do we get this out to maybe help out veterans with it? And then that's when we started talking with some of the people at Niametic about, okay, we want to do cannabis research, but we really want to make this stick. And that's when they're like, well, you're going to need to get an institutional review board, and that basically means you've been cleared for human trials. And if you don't have this, he's like, no one's going to take you serious. And then I had an opportunity to meet with some members of Congress and ask them, what do we have to do to get this into the VA system, because it's doing wonders for myself. And they said, yeah, not only do you have to get data, but get American doctors, and you're going to have a good argument. And took about 3 or so years to put all this together, but we did, getting approved for an IRB with Niametic, and then bringing UC Irvine on top of it to be our principal investigator and to run our research out of their university. How we got tied in with Niametic. Niametic Healthcare Research Services, they have been around for just about 20 years, based out of Israel. They really started making some big impacts working with the geriatric communities, where they were in retirement communities. They're seeing these senior citizens who were kind of just locked up in wheelchairs, non-responsive, not really doing anything. And their one nurse, Nurse in Bali, she decided, why don't we try some medical cannabis with them? And people thought that was crazy. But literally, when they started using cannabis with these senior citizens, it was a lot like that Robert De Niro and Robin Williams movie Awakenings, where you see these senior citizens, like, you could see life coming back to their eyes. Their hands were free. They were kind of moving around. They were smiling. They were engaging. They were eating food. And that's when they're like, hey, this stuff actually works. And they even did a study with it to show how it could reduce pain and anxiety and sleep. And they published in PubMed, and they were getting terrific results. So when I kind of brought the idea of what we want to do with American veterans, they were chomping at the bit, because they're like, we believe this medicine can do so much, and to have the opportunity to work with American veterans would just be a dream come true for us. Because, they too were a little bit confused by, why is America so far behind? I mean, American taxpayers literally fund some of the research in Israel that they're doing on medical cannabis. So it's kind of a novelty to them. So they saw this as a great opportunity, not just to do the right thing, but also for their organization. And that's how they were able to kind of work with some of the universities around here. And they really, captured UC Irvine and brought them on board. And they will be the ones leading the research. Dr. Victor Novak, he at one point was in charge of Harvard's Clinical Research Institute. He's our lead guy. Our principal investigator is going to be Dr. Dominguez. She is out of UC Irvine. She'll be the one taking all the notes. So I kind of tell people, there will be an American veteran. The Israeli doctors and nurses will be kind of running everything, showing the American doctors what they're doing. And the American doctors will be sitting there documenting everything to ensure that it's valid and done correctly. And that's how we're going to put our reports back together, to prove that the benefits of medical cannabis are a real thing. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, and I didn't really know where cannabis fell on the schedule. And I didn't know there was a scheduled 1, 2, 3, and 4 out there. So I just kind of looked at a bigger problem of like, hey, I think this works. How do we get it into the VA medical system? And that's when I was kind of informed of, well, listen, it's federally illegal. It's a Schedule 1 narcotic, which is above cocaine. And it literally means it is highly addictive and has no medical benefit. And I thought that was just crazy. So when I had the opportunity to meet with some congressmen, I just talked to them about it. And they were kind of explaining where things were legislatively, how people were kind of hands off due to it was a Schedule 1, and you're trying to ask them, like, how do you remove it from a Schedule 1? How do we show it? And that's when we're like, well, you're going to have to do research. We don't do enough research in this country because it is a Schedule 1. However, we know it works because we're seeing what other countries are doing. And that's when they told me, they're like, to get this to work, you're going to need to do research here in American soil with American doctors on American veterans. They're like, there is plenty of data out there that shows it works in other countries, but politicians aren't going to care. And they're like, furthermore, you could have a one-on-one conversation with a politician, and they're going to tell you, I believe it works, but I'm not going to walk out that door and talk to the media about it unless I have data to back me up. So that's when I kind of said, all right, I'll take the marching orders and I'll go and get some data and I'll get some American doctors and we'll prove the benefits overwhelmingly that they'll have no choice but to increase more research and to start removing it or moving it down the schedule list. Therapy is a good thing. We'll help get them on that path. We'll help have that conversation. We share our experiences with them. And then that's where I say, like, listen, this is a personal journey. I mean, we're working to show the medical benefits of cannabis. But for me personally, if I'm agitated or I'm feeling aggressive, if I utilize a little cannabis at nighttime, it just calms everything down and all the white noise. I mean, I even laughed to myself. There was times I was mad during the day, and I'd go home and I'll give myself a little bit of a dose, and I kind of laugh at it. I'm like, you really got pissed off about that? Like, it kind of gives you some self-reflecting time. And that's where we're saying, hey, the medical benefits here with cannabis can be tenfold, where they're going to not only just help these veterans get some sleep, reduce some pain, but I think almost give them a clarity of thought and let them process things a little bit better versus, I had a bad day, I'm going to go hit the bar and drink some Jack Daniels. I'm going to tell you how that story's going to end, and it's not going to be good. How medical cannabis has helped me, really the first thing I noticed was the sleep. It just kind of balanced everything out for me. All my concerns of the world kind of went away, and I could just kind of relax and just finally go to sleep clear-minded. On the physical pain, I mean, I just feel pain every day with my knees, my back, my shoulders, and all my joints pretty much. And you really just felt good with medical cannabis. It felt like everything kind of loosened up. You even kind of uplifted your spirits a little bit. You get like euphoric off of it, and you're happy again. And I would say I couldn't imagine doing this journey that I'm doing right now, with a nonprofit and it's a for-profit, but we like to call Helmand Valley our for-purpose organization. But it's really stressful. I mean, it is the hardest thing I've ever had to do with startup companies. And I couldn't imagine doing it without medical cannabis, where it's like, hey, I've done enough for the day. I'm going to use some cannabis. And I'm just going to relax, enjoy some family time, and just rejuvenate myself. I don't know if I would be able to get through all of it because there were some stressful times and all this stuff that it just really helped me process things a lot better and think with more clarity. People who don't believe cannabis is medicine, it's almost hard to not laugh at them. And you don't want to be disrespectful, but you just see the overwhelming evidence from people's personal stories. Yes, there is no medical data that can back it up in America at this time, but I can show you a ton of research in other countries. And you know what? How about we go talk to some people who recovered from cancer or who are recovering from post-traumatic stress or living with this every day and say, hey, I'm going to take your cannabis away, but I'm going to give you a bunch of pills and that's a better alternative. No way. But that's what we say. We got to kind of put the cherry on top and show the medical data with American doctors validating it. Helmand Valley Growers Company really derived from our unit at 1st Marine Raider Battalion. When you served in the Helmand province in Afghanistan, you became part of the Helmand Valley Gun Club, and you get an HVGC tattoo on you. So we really said, hey, we want to keep a military niche to this. So we threw HVGC up on the wall, and we came up with Helmand Valley Growers Company. We're like, well, that works out great. Let's go talk to the guys, make sure they're good with it. Not only were they all good with it, they wanted jobs when they get out of the military. And then we were thinking, okay, this would be a great way to fund our research. We're probably not going to get any federal grants. We really don't want to get tied into that. We want to keep full control. So we looked at a Paul Newman salad dressing bottle, and it said 100% of profits to charity. So we talked to our lawyers, we talked to our CPAs, are like, yeah, 100% of profits is 100% of profits. Go for it. So we said 100% of our profits that we sell from our adult use brand will funnel right back into Battle Brothers to support our medical cannabis research. So with our first $50,000 of profits we got from Helmand Valley Growers Company, we actually paid for our study design to submit to Advera to get approved for an institutional review board. So we really proudly tell everyone, hey, this isn't our research. This is a research for the entire cannabis community because they're the ones who helped us get there. I think the leadership I learned from growing up where I did and my life in the military has definitely prepared me for what I was facing here. This has been the most difficult thing I've ever had to do in my life. But, when you're especially in the special ops world, a lot of times you're not getting a full mission. They're kind of going to put you into some austere environment. They know something bad's going on out there, but you got to put the who, what, when, where, and why, and the how all together. And I feel that's kind of the same way in the cannabis world. We're playing an infinite game, but you got to have to operate in a finite arena. So they really are changing the rules on you as the game's being played. And you have to be able to, like I said in the beginning, we had a 70% solution to get out the door, but we have to be able to adjust, adapt, and overcome as things change. And they change quickly in cannabis because, again, they're still making up the rules. But I think of us having that leadership, how to be comfortable being uncomfortable, has paid dividends for us and has helped us get to this point that we are right now. It's funny what does Helmand Valley Growers Company and Battle Brothers Foundation mean to me. It's really true what people say. It's like when you start a business, it's like having a child. It is something you wake up and you think about. You go to bed, you're thinking about it. And you're giving it a lot of time. You're putting a lot of money into it. And then you start watching it grow and start seeing it take flight. And you just kind of have that proud parent feeling like, this is really happening. Look what we were working on and building. And to me, it's just overwhelming, I think, with the response of how people have responded to us and how much they've embraced us. It's just truly humbling, to be honest with you. But again, this isn't really about me or the guys on the team. It's about our veterans. And we're just very honored to be in this position where we think we're going to make a really big impact, just not on our veterans' lives, but we're going to change the medical landscape of America. And that's going to help everyone who's suffering with post-traumatic stress and other ailments as well. My commitment to the veterans, I think actions speak louder than words. Like I said, I've not taken one single paycheck since I started this thing. Everything we get, we're putting right back into the program to help out our American heroes. So, hear me now, believe me later. We're going to make this happen because we are fully committed to this. And any road bump that would have gotten away that would have stopped us, we've already cleared. And now we're just going to keep our head down and keep running until we get to the goal line. The vision we'll start with Battle Brothers Foundation. Really I want to get that into a national organization that rivals Wounded Warriors and things of that nature. And that's how we're bringing in the right people who kind of understand more, have a nonprofit background, putting them in the right leadership positions to take it to that next level. And we just want to help out as many people as possible and, again, prove the benefits of medical cannabis and hopefully get this thing to the point where it's federally legal and you can have it nationally. With Helmand Valley Growers Company, the vision of that, I would love nothing more than every time a veteran goes into the VA and they're getting their prescription of cannabis, it is a Helmand Valley Growers Company product. Because at the end of the day, we want to keep bringing veterans in here to work with us. And I just think it would be nothing more powerful than having veterans making medicine for other veterans. Yeah, so how people can help us is definitely donate to Battle Brothers Foundation. Every dollar counts. I used to laugh when I would hear that on commercials and everything, but I'm a believer. Every dollar does count. And then with Helmand Valley Growers Company, again, we got a great apparel line you can buy throughout the country if you want. And if you're here in California, purchase our products because 100% of those profits are going to go back to help out our veterans. So not only is it a great product, but your dollar will just go that far beyond and help save some lives. How has medical cannabis changed my life and the lives of the veterans? Again, like I stated before, to me, I was a Marine without a mission, and this mission now has given me a purpose again. I might not be in a cami uniform anymore, but I feel still like I'm serving my country. And just some of the feedback I'm getting from veterans when we donate some of our cannabis to them. I just had some guys tell me it's the first time I got a full night of sleep in I don't know how many years. We had one veteran who lost a leg. He said he lost his phantom pain using our medical cannabis. Just little, and there's hundreds of stories like that. That is just true rewarding. Again, we've not taken one single paycheck to ourselves yet, but you can't put a dollar value on that type of paycheck when you hear that feedback of how things you are doing are changing the lives of some great American heroes. So Battle Brothers Foundation helps out any branch of the service, any era you served in, whether it be World War II through the current conflict, anywhere in the country. You got a home here at Bauer Brothers Foundation, and we'll do the best that we can to help you live that American dream.